So, hello and welcome, guys. Hello, guys. Welcome to another live stream in Ask Me Anything on cybersecurity, tech, and AI. So, another evening, another session on Ask Me Anything, cybersecurity on tech as well as AI. I just want to start, first of all, guys, to cover a couple of things. I guess for everyone's benefit, I get a lot of questions about careers, about how to break into cybersecurity. The one thing I want to mention is, guys, there is no such a thing as just breaking into cybersecurity. You have to do the work, and you have to figure it out how or where you want to go into cybersecurity. You can't just break into cybersecurity as just a realm by itself. You have to do the work and you have to do the research to figure it out what exactly you want to do in cybersecurity. Just ping me questions in chat, guys, as I talk. I'll try to answer most of your questions in the chat. But yeah, as I was saying, there's a lot of questions that come up about breaking into cybersecurity sort of career, but you have to figure out where you want to go into cybersecurity, because I can't give you guys advice and guidance on breaking into cybersecurity if you not sure whether you want to be an analyst, whether you want to work in governance, risk and compliance, whether you want to work in pen testing and such and such. Cybersecurity is a very broad career sort of path and journey to get into, and there is no such thing as just sort of one direction that you could just take and work in cybersecurity. There's different ways, there's different journeys that you can take into that sort of career and field. So you have to figure it out where you want to go, and then then we can figure it out what's the best path and what you need to do to get there. Because the opportunities, are vast, and the paths taken into, whether it's security analyst, whether it's, engineering, whether it is pen testing, they're gonna vary very, very widely. There is no just, simple path to just go in and build a career in there. So, yeah, you have to first figure out what you want to do exactly. Where do you want to go with that career? And where your strengths lie, especially it depends what you've done previously. Most of us had some kind of career before, and jumping into cybersecurity is not an easy feat, especially nowadays. The competition is crazy. There's so many people trying to get into cybersecurity that it's getting harder and harder. Plus, you got things like AI and technologies is changing. So yeah, you have to figure it out what you want to do. But yeah, just kind of, I'm going to mention a few times, but yeah, chat is open, guys. Ask any questions about, any questions about cybersecurity, about career, about technology, or you want to find out more about specific things in AI, and I'll try and help and guide you guys through that. I've been in cybersecurity probably about 10 years now, so I've gone through the ranks and pretty much kind of covered my career from working security operation centers, where then went to engineering, worked in pen testing, worked in architecture, DevSecOps, application security, and then obviously I'm now in cybersecurity leadership. So that's kind of career journey. See people popping in. Yeah, just guys, if you have any questions, just pop it in the chat and I'll try and answer any of your questions, guys, in the chat. Just some of you guys, especially joining now, I just kind of been talking about the main questions that I get around, especially, people trying to enter or break into cybersecurity. There's always questions, how to break into cybersecurity. The thing is, cybersecurity is such big and massive field that, it's very hard to give you guys advice just breaking into cybersecurity if you don't know where you want to go or what you want to do within the cybersecurity. 4 years in pen testing, where should I go now? Well, Scorpion, I guess it depends, mate, where you want to go. Where you see because there's a number of directions you can go. Engineering is probably one that springs to mind, because you obviously have the engineering skills from pen testing, such as scripting. You could easily pivot and learn a bit of, cloud security fundamentals, AWS, Azure, and then learn how to do things like, scripting languages. Because, the one thing is that nobody's deploying cloud through graphical interface. So, everything's done through like Terraform code. So you can, I'm sure you can pretty quickly learn Terraform code and, learn how to deploy and secure cloud infrastructure. You can then pivot potentially into architecture if you don't mind doing documentation. But if you want to be technical, engineering is definitely the way to go. Elvis says, what about cybersecurity analyst? What about, you want to find out, Elvis, how to get to become cybersecurity analyst, or what you want to find out about cybersecurity analyst? If you're trying to become cybersecurity analyst, you obviously have to do the fundamentals. I always say to people, skills are way more important than certification. I see many people, do certificate sort of chasing. Yeah, I thought you would say just Scorpion. Yeah, practical stuff, no documentation. Yeah, I'd just say, have a look at cloud security engineering and look at things like, doing AZ500, which is Azure Security Engineering Certificate, doing AWS Security, security specialty certificate, and then, explore where you want to go. But yeah, talking about, cybersecurity analyst, I think the problem is, it's getting harder and harder to get in entry positions, because I see loads of MSSPs, managed security service providers, who, run their SOCs. They're kind of hiring less and less junior talent, because AI is replacing sort of the junior level talent. So, the sort of entry ceiling is getting higher. But, I would say do the fundamentals, learn things like, just learn the material. You don't necessarily need certs. You need a couple of them, maybe, something like CompTIA Security Plus. But then, doing things like try hack me, hack the box, build your home lab. The main skills, I would say that it really depends on who's and what they're hiring. Personally, for example, I hire, depends what skill level I'm trying to hire, whether it's someone junior or not. But for me, it always starts with a couple of things: aptitude and attitude. If you got passion about cybersecurity and you are a willing learner, you are straight on a good sort of stead to start your career. Skills wise is you have to be analytical mindset. You have to understand how to analyze incidents, how to pull on a thread and get to the bottom of it. You have to be calm under pressure, and things like that. But What do you think about CCNP? Well, I get these questions a lot about CCNA, CCNP. In my opinion, stuff like CCNP and CCNA, I think they are outdated because they are old school Cisco certificates that mainly were done for on-premise, firewalls and things like that, and networking sort of things. So, when we are moving towards the cloud, I think they're becoming more and more sort of extinct and behind the time. If you want to do certs and you want to move into the cloud, I would look at cloud specialties, and I would look at something. For example, I've done a couple of certificates within Kubernetes, so I've done CKA and CKS. So most of the organizations are moving from deploying virtual machines to deploying Kubernetes infrastructure. So understanding how to secure Kubernetes is a great skill to have. Tools as a cybersecurity analyst. Well, you need to learn at least one of the SIEMs, so security incident and event management platforms, whether it's Splunk, whether it's Azure Sentinel, other tools, that help, learn Wireshark, learn how to understand logs and how to analyze logs. You need to learn, for example, if you walk into Microsoft sort of Microsoft type of architecture, it always helps to learn the kind of ecosystem. So they've got Defender for endpoint, Defender for cloud, Intune, how to deploy various different security controls across the ecosystem. That's kind of the main things, but then it's otherwise it's just understanding, and understanding fundamentals. Skills are kind of, I always say, for example, in cybersecurity, people sometimes forget, but good to hear, Sergey. I'm very happy that sometimes to see that people, advice that I give that helps someone. So amazing. But skills is about learning fundamentals. It's about understanding, what alert means, how to think. It's more understanding. For example, you got impossible travel alert, which means that basically someone logged in from two different locations that are miles away. Now, what's your sort of thinking through scenario, how you would investigate that kind of incident? Like, for example, there is a malware alert. Normally the interview questions and how you build skills will test your sort of critical thinking. It will test your ability to investigate and look at correct points of how you would investigate incidents and things like that. So I would say just think about that. Pawn Labs. Yeah, Pawn Labs is good. There are a number of them. I don't remember which other platform I've done. I think there was a lot of like cloud specific labs that you can practice, because it's one thing to do like AWS security specialty certificate, but actually to learn how to deploy those controls, how to manage and change them, that's one thing. But then again, as I said, don't forget, when you do AWS or Azure certificates, you learn how to do that through graphical interface. No big organization is going to use graphical interface to deploy those controls. So you need to transfer the same controls into Terraform code and deploy that way. There's a whole ecosystem and a whole change of how things are happening in the cloud, whether it's cloud formation and things like that. So it's always good, if you're good at Python, then most of these languages are pretty similar to kind of learn and adopt and build those skills. So that's definitely a way to go. That's why I've done myself. When I started my career, I was working in a SOC. Then I was kind of tasked to building and architecting SOCs. You can even go into my YouTube channel. I've got a video which I've wrote my master's dissertation about how to build SOCs using MITRE ATT&CK and how to sort of architect your SOCs. And then I went into security engineering and architecture, and I worked for big organizations, securing and deploying clouds, building sort of cloud adoption frameworks. And then from there I went into DevSecOps, AppSec. Cloud is definitely the future. Look at any organization. The on-prem is becoming sort of smaller and smaller piece of the pie. There's more and more organizations are moving to the cloud, or they are somewhat hybrid and moving sort of the last pieces of their on-prem infrastructure into the cloud. So cloud is always going to be is always going to be the one, especially now. Building AI on premise as well. AI adoption is going to happen mainly in the cloud, and there are different competitors popping up to Azure and AWS. For cloud, for example, in UK, you got another company, CUDA, that's massively growing, where it allows to build your AI infrastructure on their stuff. So yeah, that's going to be kind of the direction I think where we're definitely going to go. But yeah, guys, everyone's just joining. As I said, drop any questions in the chat if you got, not necessarily, about cybersecurity career, anything about cybersecurity you want to find out, anything about technology, or you want to learn more about AI. So, I'm happy to kind of help and answer any questions and guide. And, as somebody mentioned in the chat, even, help people, advice, hopefully, that they landed a good interviews and got a job. Scorpion says AWS or Google. I always look at these things, yes, you can do either or, but if I'm talking numbers game, AWS is still the biggest cloud, and it still has the most amount of customers. So if you're choosing numbers game, that opportunities that's going to come, AWS is always going to be more prevalent in that sense. But, Azure, I think, is second. I think Google is the third cloud currently. So if I'm choosing AWS or Azure. Google will be third choice. Do you mean it's difficult to have junior role in cybersecurity analyst? Yeah. I think, the barrier or the breaking point into cybersecurity, Elvis, is getting harder and harder, because I think the problem is as well, and I see this often, people think that, I'm going to do a couple of certificates and just going to get a cybersecurity role. That's no longer the case. People are looking for, actual skills, what you've done. That's why I always say to people, you want to differentiate, you want to build your own labs, you want to showcase people how you are building your skills, because cert's not going to just land your role. You need to showcase what you've done on your own back and how you developed your own skills. Someone says, are offensive security engineers in high demand or no? Define high demand. They're always going to be in high demand, but the problem is, offensive security engineering, that kind of, it's not every organization can afford to have offensive engineers. They're kind of more destined for very large organizations that have red teams and things like that, and they have some pen testing form, or the other option is you go into managed security service provider that provides those services to others. So that's kind of the way to go. But offensive security is always going to be important part of the program, because you can't really mark your own homework, because you can build good cyber defense, but how do you verify that they're working the way it should be working? Offensive engineers are the way to go. And if you are aware, you always try to get to the you got blue teaming defense, you got red teaming, and then you got purple teaming, which becomes the big organizations are building purple teaming, which becomes a sort of endless cycle where red teamers go and attack something. If they break in, they feed back to the blue team how to make it stronger and better to resist, and then then go attack again. Yeah, Scorpion, there's no point sugarcoating. I'm always trying to tell the truth, and I think that's why sometimes certification bodies and all the stuff that you see online, it's not always helpful, because they promise you the world, but it doesn't always happen. I mean, uni will learn basics. Is it good to become a back-end engineer and then go to cyber? Yeah, I think, because the way cybersecurity is currently going, I think sometimes going to IT is probably easier, you know, and you can, because then you can pivot once you are in technology. Because as I say, cybersecurity is becoming harder and harder to get into it. So doing, you know, sometimes even something that's help desk, it's still a sort of step towards the right direction. Nessus virus total strong fundamental. Yeah, exactly. You know, I didn't see. Sorry, I just skipped. I didn't see all your note there. Yeah, Scorpion. Red Team is obviously more exciting because you get to hack stuff, but it depends, I guess, where you work as well. You know, Scorpion. If you ever worked for a pen testing company, you know, it's probably not as exciting because, you know, I always say to people, pen testing, it sounds sexy what you see on the movies, but the problem is, in the real world, or for working for a pen testing company, you do pen testing maybe, you know, 20% of the time. 70% of the time is writing reports and then trying to explain to people how you penetrated something and how they can fix and make it better. Well, yeah, freelance is always the way to go, and I think, you know, if you want to make a career, you know, or you want to, you know, become something, working for yourself is always the best. If I'm really struggling with uni to understand fundamentals, well, what's your name? Pen, whatever the long name. Struggling with uni to understand fundamentals. You know, to be honest, I would say, and I said before to people, if you went to uni to get cybersecurity career, in a way, I think you're wasting a lot of money. There's no point going to uni to do cybersecurity. I think, you know, you can uni degree is what, 3 years, and nowadays I think it's like 30 grand. You can do self-learning in probably third of the time and probably tenth of the cost. You can spend, you know, 3-4 grand, if less than that, probably building your self-learning journey. And you don't need a degree to work in cybersecurity. You know, I started in cybersecurity without a degree. I only got masters later in my career, but and still now I think that my master's degree is pretty much worthless because I didn't learn anything in there. You know, you have to understand that most of these uni programs in cybersecurity are, you know, by the time you do them, they're about 5 to 6 years out of date, and you learn stuff that, you know, out of date. Yes, it helps you learn critical thinking and stuff like that, and there are decent cybersecurity programs, especially in US, but that gives you some certificates and things like that. But, you know, you don't need to do. Yeah, Scorpion, exactly. You don't necessarily need a degree, you know. I think, you know, I always say there's different ways in there. Which is the most hands-on, less paperwork in cybersecurity? Well, there's a couple of them. Obviously, engineering is always going to be the most kind of, in that sense, hands-on, less paperwork. Similar in, you know, cybersecurity analyst or SOC analyst. These are the kind of probably the most hands-on. DevSecOps is kind of works in a similar sense, or application security engineering and things like that. Anything to do with engineering is always going to be, you know, less documentation. Architecture is a bit more documentation. You know, governance, risk and compliance is a lot of documentation. Pen testing, I would say 50-50 kind of thing. Again, depends where you end up and in what organization and in what realm and where you do the pen testing. But yeah, there's anything with engineering is obviously going to be way less paperwork and way less hands-on, and especially if, you know, if your organization is kind of heavily, if you land in some good organization, especially like, you know, quant trading and stuff like that, and then, you know, financial, some of the organizations that, you know, allows and helps you in, you know, and you can, they are kind of interested in building their own tools, you know, scripting and automating stuff. The most difficult documentation is there. Yeah, I can imagine, Scorpion. If you are, you know, anyone who loves hacking, you know, documentation is going to be a pain in your behind. Can you suggest education for DevSecOps, please? What and where to learn? DevSecOps is a bit tricky one because you need to kind of have some experience or some knowledge of software development or software engineering. But there are a few things. I don't remember the website, but there is now DevSecOps Academy, and there are DevSecOps certificates. But it's kind of it's a cycle between kind of, you become essentially a conduit between development and operations, and you kind of trying to plug in security in there. So securing pipelines, plugging in, CI security tools into CI and CD. That's essentially what is DevSecOps. You are deploying things like, if you heard SNCC, static application security testing, dynamic application security testing, software composition analysis tools, stuff like that. Infrastructure as code analysis tools and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. That's the way to go, Pen Spinner. You can just get any entry level IT role. Build experience while you're at uni, especially if you're doing it part time. Yeah. Thanks, Scorpion. I try to always give back and share. When I started my career, there's been some great people around me who helped me a lot, and I always say, I think cybersecurity is an amazing career choice and an industry to be in, because there's so many amazing and helpful people that are always looking to lift each other up. Everyone's looking always to help and guide everyone. There's you guys, especially now, those who are trying to break into cybersecurity, you are in the probably best part and best world to be at, because the abundance of information out there that you can do for free. There's even, before you need to buy courses. Now there is even whole CompTIA courses on YouTube. There's other courses on YouTube. There's people like myself and others, doing videos and advice that, everything is at your fingertips. Yeah, obviously, yeah. Well, if your course is not related at cyber, then you can always do specific courses and paths. Like, for example, go and try Hack Me and do cybersecurity sort of fundamentals pathway. You can start learning bits and bobs and adding information. Google is your oyster. YouTube, you can learn so much. Hi, can you give advice and 19 years who want to be a pen tester? Well, my main advice, anyone who wants to be a pen tester and want to do become a junior sort of career into pen testing, I would say don't. I would say try find any technology job as an entry level, even a SOC analyst or something like that, because pen testing is not necessarily a junior level sort of route or career. It's very hard to find junior level roles in pen testing, and it's almost impossible. So I would say get into cybersecurity, into any role possible, and then build your skills, because once you're in it, then you can pivot into pen testing if that's your goal. But first of all, understand and talk to someone like Scorpion, is a pen tester. He will explain, people think that pen testing is this sexy career, but the amount of report writing and the amount of actual hacking you do is not necessarily what's, been told. So you have to pick what's going to be best to your skills, to your, passions. You might end up in pen testing and you might actually hate it. So you have to do a bit more digging and a bit more understanding what it is. And yeah, Scorpion is absolutely right. I see so many people, for example, I went through 10 years ago, I went through CompTIA A+, Network Plus, and only then Security Plus. I see so many people trying to short circuit this career into cybersecurity, where they just jump straight into Security Plus, but they have no networking knowledge. And in cybersecurity, you're going to struggle a lot if you don't have networking fundamentals, if you don't understand how operating systems works and things like that. You have to build the fundamental skills first. You have to understand, not necessarily OSI layers, but you have to understand, networking stacks, and, how to configure firewalls and things like that. Without networking knowledge, you're gonna get left behind very quickly. You're gonna get dropped in the deep end, and you're gonna struggle. So networking is absolutely important, fundamental to have in your bag. You don't necessarily need to do network plus certificates, but you need to be able to absorb and understand the knowledge from that certification. And I always say, whenever you study, well, yeah, exactly. How can you defend the network if you don't know how it works? That's a prime example, or how you can harden your network if you don't understand how the network operates and things like that. There's so much important knowledge in networking that you have to build first before you kind of jump into that route. So anyone or any sort of pathway or any of these boot camps that offer you cybersecurity, guaranteed career in 3 months is a lot of nonsense. I think I landed my first role after 8 or 9 months, but I used to spend literally about anywhere from 3 to 5 hours every single day studying relentlessly. And yes, I had some certs, but I did some things which I think people sometimes forget. But the main things how I think mine helped is I posted a lot on LinkedIn and showed my learning journey. And then what I also did and got great advice was I participated and did some public speaking in various webinars. You have to get out of your skin. I was a junior and it's hard to do that. But, one of the conferences that I presented, that's how I got my job. One of the hiring managers saw my presentation and, then spoke to the organizers, and I applied for the job. And, that's how I got the job, because they saw my presentation previously. Yeah, Scorpion, exactly. You need projects. You need to sort of, I think nowadays sometimes CV is good, but if you can share stuff and the work that you've done alongside your CV, such as you say, CTFs and things like that, that's going to tremendously elevate you amongst those who are in competition with you. Manga, which role is the best for a beginner? I always talk about numbers game. If we talk a numbers game, now if you go on LinkedIn and look for junior cybersecurity role, probably out of the 100 roles, 80 or 90 of them are going to be as a SOC analyst or cybersecurity analyst or something along those lines. So if I play numbers game, that's the role I'm going for, because they have the most roles. That means that's the most chances for me to land the role. Out of 100, how many are you going to find pen tester junior role? If one, you're going to be lucky, if that. So, numbers game, SOC, cybersecurity analyst, that's the way to go. They're the most roles and they have the most entry positions to go in. If you have an idea where you want to go somewhere else, first get a SOC role, learn the basics, build some skills, spend a couple of years in there, and then you can pivot and go wherever you want. I have a question. I'm a beginner in embedded systems. Are you a fan of it? Well, depends. Which embedded systems and what you mean. You mean stuff like OT and operational technology? It's if that's the case, and C programming. Yeah, well, OT is always going to be electronic system. No. Yeah, I think anything to do with that sort of technology and electronics and is always going to be needed. Especially if you can add additional skills from in embedded systems in sort of operational technology, manufacturing plants and how systems operate. The security is important in that as well, especially places around Europe. I've got friends who are CISOs in Switzerland, and they pay a lot of money for OT security people. that's a definitely good way to, to build the skills and become relevant. I think, the more niche the type of sort of career path you take, the more chances to be in demand and build yourself a career that, really differentiates amongst, other people. OT is definitely an interesting sort of perspective, as you say, embedded systems and things like that. And especially now, when you talk about OT, there is a whole sort of spectrum of where it's going. We're talking about robots, we're talking about driverless cars. All of these things are gonna sort of merge together and understand how to secure and work in those systems. It's going to be definitely an important move in the near future. So yeah, definitely. Any more questions, guys? I love electronics and doing it in parallel with a job I hate. Yeah, I know it's tough. It's tough being in position. I always be. Somebody told me many years ago. Find the job that you love, and you're never gonna work a day in your life. And I always used to think, what a load of nonsense. But seriously, since I've been in cybersecurity, for the last probably 10 years, I've never dreaded, Monday morning. I never thought, oh no, Monday I have to go back to work. I'm, happily going with work, and I'm happy to do extracurricular activities. I run my cybersecurity podcast on YouTube. I do a lot of public speaking. I do this, guys, to help you and help the next generation and answer any questions and guide people in the career. I'm a board advisor for many cybersecurity companies, and I'm a CISO by day as well. There's loads of stuff that I'm doing, but it's because that's my passion. I love doing it, and I find tremendous joy in seeing it. Especially like earlier, somebody made a comment that they passed an interview because they saw some of my videos. That's tremendously rewarding thing to see. I never ask of anything. I just want people who find success from my advice just to pass it on to the next one, and hopefully improve this industry in the future. Well, is offensive security better than defensive security? Well, define better, Smanga. There is no one better or the other. If you're talking about hardest, I think offensive security is definitely harder because it's a bit more technical and it's a bit more nuanced, and you need to understand things a lot better. But the thing is, obviously, offensive security is a bit more narrow. Defensive security, there's so much more stuff that you can do on defensive side, because you got governance, risk and compliance, you got engineering, you got analysts, you got architecture. Whereas offensive security is pretty much, pen testing or red teaming, which is very, very similar. Yeah, it's definitely, as you say, scoping is hard, but yeah, it's exciting, But as we just discussed, it's pretty much impossible to go into offensive security as a junior. So start somewhere else and then pivot into pen testing if that's your goal. It's definitely an exciting path, but again, it really depends where you're gonna go. Working for a pen testing company, I would say it's not as exciting as working for a big organization that allows you to test and explore and try and penetrate and hack various applications and stuff that internal teams are building. So yeah, because the pen testing, don't forget, every engagement has a scope, so you are constrained only by the scope that this sort of engagement allows what you to do. You're not just going and no organization will allow you to just go and hack whatever you want. You'll get one little snippet of this organization application, and that's your sort of engagement as it is. But that's all you will be able to do in that sense. Okay, a couple more questions, guys. If you got a couple more minutes, and then I'm gonna finish in about 4 or 5 minutes. Well, yeah, exactly, Scorpion. You have to ask for permission, especially, you know. I guess bug bounty is another way of doing pen testing, and you know, I guess people are finding careers now in bug bounty where, you know, you can make decent money if you got decent skills. You know, I think you got stuff like HackerOne, Bug Crowd, and stuff like that. There is various kind of platforms now where you can do bug bounty, so you sort of chasing bugs and you know, exploiting, you know, especially, you know, companies like Apple and stuff like that. They pay big bucks, you know. I think I saw somewhere there's leaderboards, you know, in there where the guys make $1 million in a year, but obviously they are the best of the best. But nobody stops you from exploring, and that could be your another sort of way to build skills, but as well as portfolio. You know, you can show your leaderboard on bug bounty platforms and show how you are building and developing skills in pen testing. So that's definitely a way, you know, one of the ways to go, and it's actually probably you can build a decent career. You know, some people probably quit their jobs and do just bug bounty because they make enough money just from that. Just see if there's any questions anywhere else. Nothing there. Cool. Well, guys, if no one's got any questions, you know, as always, it was pleasure to, you know, to chat with you guys. Pleasure to see you guys and have you know, and spend some time with you guys. Thank you very much. It's great to have, you know, followers from all over the world, from Italy even. You know, it was great to that you found my account useful. So guys, yeah, follow. Oh, there you go, Romania. You know, fellow Eastern European. You know, I'm originally from Lithuania. So great, guys. It was lovely to spend some time with you. Have a great evening. You know, what I'll try and do, guys, now so pretty much every Tuesdays at 6 p.m. British time. So this obviously now we are 43 minutes past, but I'll try and do these sort of you know, ask me anything sessions every Tuesday at 6 p.m. You know, if you don't have any questions now, obviously, you know, do your own research, figure out what you want to do, and come back. You know, I'll always try and help and guide you and answer any of the questions that you might have, and then hopefully that's going to help you guys in the future. So yeah. Have a good night, guys. Keep grinding. Build those cybersecurity, you know, skills and careers, and I wish you all the success in the near future, guys. See you later, guys.